And hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Kuehl Show. I am your host today, the insider of the insiders, Tyler Kuehl. And guys, week 2 here in the new studio. And let me tell you, 2 big yes this week on TKS. We're not, now don't think this is going to be like some linear thing. It's like the next week's week 3, we're going to have 3 and 4 and 5. Because I'll be honest with you, by the time we get to week 24, I don't know how we're going to be able to fit 24 guests on the show here. But I digress. We have so much to talk about today. Later on, in just about an hour's time, we're going to have Zach Martin coming on from Cannons and Tomahawks podcast to talk about the Chicago Blackhawks. Something we kind of wanted to wait on for this because we wanted someone from the Blackhawks side of things to talk about the situation with Brad Aldrich. But in just a moment here, we'll have our first guest talking about the Yotes, talking Coyotes coming up here, talking about what's going on in Glendale. Also, Women's Worlds action starting up this past weekend. We got Japan and Czech Republic, a big Group B match going on up in Calgary. It's on the TV here in the studio. The wife is out there watching TV as well. I look at the stream. We're not dropping any frames, which is always good news here in the news studio. Make sure everything looks good. So, with that, let's thank the awesome sponsors that we have here on 12 Ounce Sports. By the way, because you're watching on 12 Ounce Sports, that means you're watching us on Twitter, on Facebook, or Zingo TV, YouTube as well. Zingo TV, by the way, if you ever want to check it out, it's a cool thing. You can stream on your Roku, on your smart TV, and all that good stuff. Channel 761 on there. Use the promo code 12ounce. That's the number 1, the number 2, the letter O, and letter Z or Z for you improper English users to sign up for free on Zingo TV. And of course, we must thank the awesome people that get us here and make sure the show runs smoothly, for the most part at least. MyBookie.ag down there in the corner, guys. Guys, guess what? Baseball's starting to get towards the postseason. WNBA starting to get closer to the postseason. Big money can be won on those sort of events. And oh, by the way, the NFL and college football is about to start up. Go on mybookie.ag. Use the promo code 12ounce sports. Win and get paid on mybookie.ag. And as always, up in the corner on my laptop, which you can't really see at this moment in time, my shirts are in the dresser. I wear them all the time. Second String Leather Company. #crafted from the crease, guys. Collection number 9 is out. The products are awesome. They are, I almost used the word fly there, but I just said it, so I did use the word fly. They are cool. I'm not going to use the 3-letter word the kids use nowadays in terms of lighting a candle. Not going to say that, but all the awesome stuff there on secondstringleather.com. Check it out. #crafted from the crease. So with that, we must bring on our first guest today. We've had him on a time or two before. We've had him on a bunch of times, actually, now I think about it. At least twice. He is an Arizona Coyotes reporter. At least for now, because we don't know what the future of this franchise holds. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the show. None other than Louis Pannone. Louis, how are we doing today?
I'm doing great, Tyler. How are you doing?
Well, the coffee is a-kicking. The hockey is on, even though it's August, which is, you know what? I know the tournament. I don't know how much you've been watching the Women's Worlds there, Louis, but I can tell you, hockey in August, as weird as it is, it's kind of a blessing that the tournament got pushed back, because when we talked with Dan Rice last week, we're talking about how usually the tournament takes place in April when the playoffs are going on, so not many eyes. But now in August, I mean, it makes me feel a little bit cooler. It's about 75, it's about 85 actually now here in Michigan. I don't know how bad it's down there in Arizona, but it makes me feel a little bit cooler knowing that hockey's being played.
Absolutely. We kind of got used to having hockey, last August with the playoffs and everything going on. So it's nice to continue that.
Yeah, odd times for hockey is the epitome of the pandemic, which makes me just say I'm glad, hopefully, knock on wood, we get out of this soon. But I guess if there's any possible silver lining of this pandemic, it means we've had hockey year-round, which I guess I'm okay with. But
Absolutely.
First of all, Louis, how have you been? We haven't talked to you in a while, man. How are things?
Doing great. You said it's 85 degrees where you're at. It's about 105 out here. So, we're just trying to stay indoors. And, if I'm not indoors, I'm in my car driving to Oceanside to play some hockey out there. So,
Well, that's always good.
Play some cool. Cool.
Isn't that that's still where the Sun Devils are at, right?
Yeah, they currently play at Oceanside, little rink and Tempe, but they've got their own barn here. I think next season they should have their own place built.
So that's the best way to somehow segue into this conversation. The big news at the end of last week, Louis, the city of Glendale pretty much giving the finger to the Coyotes, saying that they're not going to allow them to renew their lease at the end of this coming season. Now, I for those that don't know, I don't think I've mentioned this before on the show. I probably have. On my ACT, which for those in the Midwest was pretty much the Midwest version, the Michigan version of the SAT. They don't exist anymore, obviously, because Michigan's like, well, maybe we should buy in. Hey, by the way, United States, can you all go to metric so we can get with everyone else? But that's neither here nor there. But the thing is that you had to write an argumentative essay. And this would have been March of 2012, my junior year of high school. And my argument was that the Phoenix Coyotes at that point should no longer be a franchise and they should move to Quebec City. Let's fast forward 9 years later, Lewis, and we're having this conversation again. And, to make matters, I don't want to say worse, because remember one of the times we had you on, we were talking about how the fans were going there in Glendale at Gila Arena and people were showing up and the fan base there in Arizona is strong. And now here we are again questioning the legitimacy of a franchise in the South, at least the Southern West United States.
Absolutely. Like you said, we've, been dealing with this for 10 years. This is just the latest chapter in what can only be described as a saga between, the Coyotes and Glendale. It seems like we're almost back to square one. We had the bankruptcy, I think in 2010, 2011. There was, questions about whether the Coyotes were even going to be able to stay in Arizona. There was league ownership. There was all kinds of stuff going on. They somehow went to the conference finals during that time frame. We've had a couple of new owners since then, and now we're back to square one. I think it seems like the Coyotes had that 1 year at a time lease with Glendale, and now Glendale, sort of is opting out of that. So beyond next season, I think we'll have to. The Coyotes might have a serious chance of leaving here if they can't get something figured out.
As someone who is both follows the team and is also a fan of the franchise, where are you at? Are you thinking that this is going to happen where, I'm not saying it's going to be Quebec City, even though the resources have almost been set up there for the most part. That's a discussion for a later date. Or do you think that the Coyotes are going to be able to stay, whether it be somehow pull out something out of the keister in Glendale, have to go back to Phoenix and Phoenix Suns Arena, which was why they moved to Glendale in the first place, because that is not a hockey arena. Let's make that perfectly clear. Or, as we just kind of briefly mentioned there, Tempe, where Arizona State plays. Where is the possibility? What is your mindset with this whole thing on where they could end up?
It's hard to tell right now. They've been kind of kicking the can down the road here for the last couple of years. We'll figure something out. Something will come up. We'll just stay in Glendale until we get something figured out. Well, now Glendale's kicking you out. So the time frame has definitely speeded up. As far as going back downtown to the Suns Arena, I'm not sure if that's a realistic possibility, just based on the fact that the Suns owner hasn't really been willing to do that in the past. And, wouldn't really want to accommodate the Coyotes while they build their own arena to compete for concerts, events, and whatnot. So not sure there'd be any interest there from the Suns. And then Glendale, it could be a negotiating thing. It could not. They said that they're not looking to return to the negotiating table for this. So, I think Gary Bettman came out and said that it was a negotiating tactic. So I guess we'll have to see what happens. Money talk, all that stuff. So if the Coyotes can throw some more money Glendale's way, I could definitely see them staying in Glendale until they can get something figured out. Maybe a new arena in Tempe. There's definitely been some traction for that here lately.
Well, hearing Gary Bettman saying that it's a negotiating tactic, first of all, is the most Gary Bettman thing, the most lawyer thing he could possibly say when it comes to these sort of things. We've seen it all the time, and when we talk about the Blackhawks later, we'll definitely get into that whole scenario with Gary Bettman. But that's the thing is, you want to stay optimistic. Obviously, they are sold on that team should be in Arizona. Now, granted, myself, I listen to a lot of Canadian sports radio. Trust me, when that news broke on Friday, everyone that was in primetime radio or television was full scale. Here come the Nordique! That's pretty much how it was, Lewis. And I, as someone who loves to, like I said, 10 years ago, I was full scale. Get Arizona out of here. Dallas is a joke. All the California teams, except for the Ducks and at that point the Kings, suck. Why even bother with all these Southern teams? I was that kind of way. But now I'm like, you know what? If you can make it work, but my thing is, Lewis, it's hard to say it should still work in Arizona when the city that you were playing in says we don't want you here. That's where I think is where it's hard, because you can have as many fans as you want. Heck, how'd the Phoenix Coyotes come to be? Because the Winnipeg Jets owners didn't want to pay the bucks anymore. They couldn't afford it. They didn't want it to work, even though the fans still showed up, 17,000, 18,000 strong in the old Winnipeg Arena. They still couldn't make it work. So now we're back, I guess if you say the cycles come back around to Arizona here, if the city of Glendale, and I guess any real big city in Arizona that has an arena, doesn't want the Coyotes, is it still worth it to put the effort and to go through all the negotiations to keep the team there?
Yeah, that's a very good point. They've had trouble with the ownership, like you said. They've had trouble keeping a stable ownership. They've had trouble even having ownership during the league ownership era. So it's been kind of, they've just been tossed around, between billionaires here recently. So, it seems like no one's been able to get anything happening with the Coyotes. They haven't had any chance or any success in getting a new arena built elsewhere in 10 years. So, like it's definitely, time is running out here. So if they can't get something figured out, we definitely could be looking at a possible relocation. But I do think, like you said, Gary Bettman is, extremely interested in the Phoenix market for his own reasons. Maybe that's because we're the fifth largest market. Maybe it's because the Coyotes have, the footprint here. There's lots of hockey being played here. You got Austin Matthews. There could be a variety of reasons for his wanting to keep the Coyotes here. But I think in the end, his belief to keep the Coyotes here will prevail. I think they'll get something figured out. But I could just as easily see it, not work out. And you got a bunch of cities that are ready for teams. You got Houston, Kansas City, Quebec City. You got all kinds of people, waiting for a team. So if they can't get it figured out here, might have to look elsewhere.
I will say, as someone who grew up in the IHL era when they had the Kansas City Blades, if they can't make it work in Arizona or Phoenix or whatever, but they can somehow make it work in Kansas City, I call that back asswards if you ask me, because I'm like, what? Because I love the people in KC. I've had a couple guys actually played for the Monarchs over there in the ECHL, and it's got some fans and whatnot, but I don't know if an NHL team could work there. Heck, the one why the Devils came to be, kids, because the Kansas City Scouts couldn't make it work, and then the Rockies couldn't work, and then they became the Devils, and then the rest is history. But because this team, I don't know if I'd say I fell back in love with it, because when they brought back the Kachinas, I got really excited for them all over again. The Jeremy Roenick nostalgia came flying back to me, Habby Bulin, Kachuk, the whole 9 yards. But I almost, as much as I want to see a team back in Quebec, to see if it could work, because the way things ended in Quebec back in 95 are very similar in the story to Winnipeg. So I'm like, hey, if the fan base is there, the money works out, and you can make it work. But at this point, it's almost as if you can try to get it to work, why not? But it's so hard to see that when even as many fans there can be, that Glendale says no, and if Phoenix says no, and if they can't make it work in Tempe. Now, I don't know if Arizona, because the rink in Tempe is going to be owned by Arizona State, correct?
That's correct. It's going to be about a 5,000 seat, college hockey focused rink.
Oh man, that's probably not going to work. I mean, hey, listen, we have seen weirder stuff happen in the National Hockey League, but I guarantee Bettman would not want to see it. I'll tell you, look at the bright side. No one can ever complain that the Arizona Coyotes can't sell out, because all the 5,000 people that are at the games will finally actually be all in one building. It'll look pretty packed. But you want it to happen, but once again, if the support's not there from the people that are in charge of those decisions, it's almost as if you are the Coyotes, you are the ownership that wants to keep the team there, it's almost not worth the effort, I guess, is my thing with the owners. Is I know you want to stay there, but if you're unwelcome, you may as well leave the party.
Exactly. Like you said, they get kicked out of Glendale. Downtown Phoenix doesn't want them. Tempe, we'll see. They have there's an RFP out there for a possible arena, with hotels and all that stuff. I think the Coyotes owner has a background in real estate, has a background in casinos. I believe he also has a sports gambling license in Arizona, which there's few of, which is, definitely a license to make some money. So I could see them, making a kind of a mixed use area with a sports book, with the hotels, entertainment, an arena sort of thing in Tempe. But, that's definitely, still on the drawing board. No, and like I've said it for years, until I see a shovel go into the ground, I'm not going to really get too excited about any of these proposals or anything like that here.
Well, there were some. Well, of course, people remember that one point. I believe it was around the time when the first real ownership problems happened in the late 2000s, early 2010s. When I forgot the guy's name, but he wanted to build an arena in Markham, Ontario, home of Steven Stamkos, and have a second team in the Toronto area. And I guess there was money there. And everyone's like, there's going to be 2 Toronto teams. It's going to be crazy. And it's going to be the GTA rivalry, blah, blah, blah. And then nothing came to it, because I guess there must have been communication with the league that there was no way they were going to allow 2 teams in the Toronto market. But like you said, I was not going to believe it until I saw it, as exciting as it would have been. So trying to think optimistically then, or at least trying to focus on this season, because as much as we can look in the future and hope that something gets, a deal goes down, whether it be a 1-year deal or a 2-year deal, just to at least keep them until they can maybe find, like you said, an arena in Tempe, or somehow Phoenix the Phoenix Suns want to have another team. I don't know. That probably will never happen. But what about this year's team? Should Coyotes fans be excited about? Because obviously we see it. The rebuild has come back into the state of Arizona. Ekman Larson gone, and oh gosh, now I can't think of. Connor Garland is gone. You have Darcy Kemper going to Colorado. What gets you excited about this hockey team, except for Clayton Keller?
Well, in terms of just solely next season, there's not going to be a whole lot, of excitement on the ice. They definitely are going to be in contention to be the worst team in the league, I think. But I think that's going to be, honestly, probably their goal. That's like you said, they're going into a rebuild. You got some good prospects coming up the next couple of years. You got Connor Bedard and Shane Wright coming in. So I think the Coyotes, are they're you could say sinking their own ship here at a good time, to bottom out and try to get lucky in the draft lottery, which they haven't yet. So we'll have to see how that strategy works out for them here in the future if they end up in the lottery again, which they look like they will. But I think just in terms of the team on the ice this year, there's not a whole lot to get excited about. But just looking to the future, there's a lot. Like Connor Garland with a new coaching staff. Jacob Chikrin last year maybe was a top 10 defenseman in the league. It's going to be exciting to see if he can continue to take those steps forward. You got a lot of young guys will be playing next year. Barrett Hayton looking to still make an impact in the NHL. Victor Soderstrom looking to still make an impact in the NHL. So there's going to be some stuff to get excited about. Just as a team, it probably isn't going to be very successful in terms of standings and points and wins and all that. But there's some stuff to get excited about.
Yeah, and that's why these teams are interesting. And this is coming from a guy who watched the Toronto Maple Leafs outside of that 2013 year, just have some miserable years. But it was always kind of fun because, there were kids that you wouldn't really see typically play on good teams or consistent playoff teams. And I can name a bunch that, guys like Mikhail Grabovski, who had a couple good years. Like there's a lot of players that you'll get to see and a lot of young kids that may not get chances that'll have that opportunity to play. I don't say a little bit of a spotlight, but get opportunities to play in the top 6 or in the top 4, and where in most years they may not. And I look at Barrett Hayton, I say to myself all the time, and I'm like, did that injury in 2020, or not 2020, 2019 hurt him? Because I think he has so much to give still, but that it just seemed like he never got his footing in the end of that season after being injured at the World Juniors. But now, do you think he's going to be a guy that the Coyotes, their offense is going to need if they want to have any chance of winning some hockey games next season?
Absolutely. I think Barrett Hayton is probably the most important player in terms of the future for the Coyotes. They, like you mentioned, Jerry Roenick before, they haven't had a number one center since those days. They've had guys, try to.
What about Shane Doan? Shane Doan's number is in the rafters. That darn
yeah,
building.
He is a great right winger, but they haven't had the center the playmaking center or the goal scoring center to kind of help these guys, advance. I wrote an article about it a couple of years ago about Shane Doan's Hall of Fame possibilities, and if he was playing on maybe some better teams, better Coyotes teams, you could make that argument. But didn't get to 1,000 points, largely because they never had a center to play with him that was a top 6 or even top 9 center that was good enough. So center's been a huge position of need for them for so long, and if Barrett Hayton can live up to the hype, so to speak, he's had success in every level of hockey that he's been at so far. So if he's able to make that jump to the NHL and have some success next season, that would definitely go a long way towards the Coyotes, getting back to relevancy, sooner rather than later.
It's funny. You look at this roster, and I'm going to go off through a couple of the names, and we've obviously gone over some of the signings in the past. But of course, we mentioned Keller and Kessel. Of course, they have Christian Dvorak still there. But they have names on there. I don't know if Andrew Ladd's going to play. I know he wants to play, but I don't know if he will. Antoine Roussel, Jay Beagle, Ryan DeZingle, Anton Strawman, Shane Gostisbehere. Lewis, you got to tell me that this team would be great in 2015, right?
Absolutely. Actually, I texted a buddy of mine that when they were making all these trades, it's like, well, we're looking good for the 2016 Western Conference champions. If we want to play from that, but unfortunately, it's 2021-22 now. So we'll have to see if some of those guys can maybe get back to where they were a couple of years ago, especially Shane Gostisbehere. I think he has some injury troubles in Philadelphia, but when healthy, he can be electric defenseman, offensive defenseman. So it's just going to depend on if these guys can stay healthy and get back to where they were previously.
Because think of it this way, too. Shane Gostisbehere came from Philadelphia, and that last year that team was an unmitigated disaster, at least compared to their expectations. And you see these guys, quite often go from big markets, big spotlight, lots of pressure. They're not playing the best. And then they go to these smaller markets, and there's a lot of pressure that's relieved from them. They don't need to be superstars. They just need to play well enough to be an everyday NHLer. And guys like Anton Strollman and Gostisbehere and, Beagle and Roussel maybe because, they're not getting – they are getting paid a big chunk of money to play, but it's not like, I don't think Bill Armstrong's going to get fired over trading for them. But, at least, these guys maybe have a little bit of rejuvenation. They get to play in the sun. They get to relax. They get to go to practice in shorts. Arizona State, that should be, if that's not their recruiting ploy, that should be like on their pamphlet whenever they send it to guys. You get to show up in shorts all the time to practice. But they get to go out, no pun intended, their careers. They get to go off in the sunset and get a chance to play. And that could help them, at least from my eyes, from the player's perspective, give them an opportunity to show these younger kids that, hey, here's how to be an everyday NHLer, and here's what it takes to make it and make it for a long time, given the fact that these guys have played for a few years.
Absolutely. Like you said, it's definitely a lower stress environment to play in Arizona versus someplace like Philadelphia or even Vancouver, one of the Canadian cities where, Oliver Ekman-Larsson and Connor Garland went to, and they get a couple players back. So definitely a lower stress environment. There's less media attention here. You can actually go to the store if you need to, and no one's going to, ask you for an autograph while you're trying to, swipe your credit card.
Hey,
or something. So,
Roussel, $3 million. You want to get our milk today, bud? Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's not going to happen down there in Glendale.
Yeah, there shouldn't be anything like that happening here. But like you said, it could be rejuvenation. We saw kind of an opposite thing happen with Ilya Bryzgalov. He was a Vezina, contender goaltender here. Left, went to Philadelphia, and kind of, the pressure was too much for him. So we'll see if maybe
became an astrologist and astronomist.
a lot of things happened to him in Philadelphia that definitely were not good. So we'll see if maybe we get the opposite effect with Gostisbehere, and he can come out to Arizona and just play hockey and not have to worry about the media or anything like that.
Well, I want to quickly jump back to last season because I will be honest, I put Arizona, I think I had them 5th finishing in the West because I just felt like since Minnesota was in that division that Minnesota was going to do their thing where they just barely get in the playoffs and lose in the first round. Well, they got 3rd, but they still knocked out the first round. So I was half right there. And I don't know what it was because, they played well in the bubble in 2020. They looked like they could have done something. Unfortunately, they ran into Colorado, who was playing that thing where they go Billy Madison on kids in dodgeball. And they did that to Arizona. And unfortunately, it just seemed like they'd never be able to recover. And, looking at it from your perspective, Lewis, what was the reason why Arizona just couldn't get consistency? Was it injuries? I know Kemper was out for a little bit. Obviously, there's the whole Antti-Raanta injury bug that went around. I don't know if Kemper got hit by it, but what went wrong last year for Arizona?
I think it was a combination of things last year. Like you said, you had the injuries. You had some young players not necessarily live up to the hype to be able to produce. You had some veterans take some steps back, notably Oliver Ekman-Larsson. You had some bright spots. Phil Kessel rebounded last year after an injury-plagued season the year before. Obviously he has a streak going, but he definitely wasn't healthy in his first year here in Arizona. But he rebounded last year. You had Connor Garland continue to play well. You had Jacob Chikrin with a breakout season. You had Aiden Hill step up and provide some solid goaltending without Kemper and Raanta injured. Just wasn't enough of it to go around. No, there wasn't enough scoring. There wasn't enough defense being played. The Coyotes had probably one of the oldest blue lines in the league last year, and they definitely started to show their age down the stretch. So just a lot of things went wrong last year, and just weren't able to overcome it.
And of course, smack dab in the middle of the season, Katie Strang with the bombshell article, one of the 2 she put out this year. My Peyton Turnage and I, we had our take. We gave our licks out there to the Gutierrez family and whatnot. And what is your take with the ownership? We heard the stories. We heard how Bill Armstrong was, and then Bill Armstrong did a radio hit the next day on Arizona Sports Talk, and I was like, anybody going to ask him about this thing? What is your take on this team? Because it makes it, with all the ownership issues in the past with this team, it just almost adds to the mantra of that the Coyotes and front office and the upper floors there. It doesn't click all the time. What is your thoughts, at least on the ownership group that's currently running the Yotes right now?
I think currently, it's going to just take some time for them to recover, especially for the front office. You had John Chaika with all of his missteps there. So in terms of the front office, it's going to take some time to recover. But in terms of the ownership, it definitely hasn't been great news so far. You've had the reports of them missing rent payments on the arena. You've had the reports of them, being late with bonus payments, which is pretty much unheard of in the NHL. So you've had that those items. You had the issue with the culture off the ice and in the workplace. I think some of that could be a carryover from the Czech administration. Also, I know there was a lot of a lot was made of it on social media about Armstrong kind of cleaning house when he first got there. I think the assistant GM quit, a bunch of other guys quit. So I think that was more of a cleaning house than anything else. But there's definitely been a lot of turnover, a lot of smoke, so to say. There could be some fire there. Just it's interesting to kind of see what's come out, and it's going to be interesting to see how they address it going forward, especially with the rent payments. That was one of the things that the city of Glendale brought up with part of the reason why they broke off this relationship. So it's going to be interesting to see if they can maybe mend that relationship and come back to Glendale, or if they can clean their act up a little bit and just go somewhere else and try to convince another municipality here to give them another chance with a new arena somewhere.
And tying this back actually into the on ice product, if you're a free agent, because let's be honest, Arizona and dating back to the Phoenix or the early days of Phoenix, it's been tough for them to get big name free agents just because the market and the fact that the team, it was hard for them to pay players the big bucks. But now that they were showing that they weren't giving bonuses, does that hurt their team as a whole on ice? Because say the hypothetical thing happens that after next season Kyle Dubas wants to clean house and he is shopping one Austin Matthews. Does Austin Matthews approve that trade, even though that's his hometown team, but he sees how things are going and doesn't want to go there just because of that reason?
I think they'll definitely have to get it together here. I've been kind of texting with my buddies and saying here, if the Coyotes have to go move back in with their parents for a couple of years, they got to go play at the old Veterans Coliseum, or they got to go play with the Suns, or they got to go pay more money to Glendale. They got to quote unquote live with their parents for a while, and then when Austin Matthews is a free agent or whatever, they can move back and get their own place and have Austin Matthews and have this grand, reinvention. So, as things currently stand, it's definitely not a great situation, but, they have a couple of years to rebuild here before they can even, think about maybe being relevant and signing free agents or getting Austin Matthews or anything like that. That's a couple of years away.
I'm going to throw you in Bill Armstrong's shoes here. And not just because we want someone else there in Arizona, but also because of the fact that maybe, how to find a way to guide this team through this, because being a general manager during a rebuild is never fun. God bless Steve Yzerman in Detroit and the patience the Pajulas have with Kevin Adams, but then again, that's a whole different can of worms that we don't need to open up here. What are you doing to, I guess, in a way, sell the team on competing every night to try to get better, but also showing that this team can be worth the price of admission for the folks in the area that want to go watch the Coyotes? I mean, what are you doing to try to make sure that this team is competitive, but at the same token, realizing that you are rebuilding and you are not going to be going to the playoffs for a couple of years?
It's definitely going to be a tough sell to the casual fans. Phoenix is notoriously a bandwagon city. One of the things I noticed this summer was the Suns with going to the NBA Finals. You couldn't get Suns tickets this summer. It was like $600, $700, $800 for nosebleeds. 5 years ago, I sat in those same seats for $10. Now, it's $600. So all you have to do is start winning games and people show up. So I think it's going to be a tough sell for the casual fans of Phoenix, but there's definitely maybe 10, 11, 12,000 diehard Coyotes fans that'll be there. But just beyond that, I think it's going to be tough to draw any of the casual or fair weather or fans that live here. They don't support the Coyotes. Maybe they came from Detroit, they came from Chicago. They still support the Red Wings, Blackhawks, stuff like that. They don't necessarily want to support the Coyotes. So it might be hard to get those fans in the building right now, but there definitely is a contingent of Coyotes fans, diehards that'll be there. So it's just going to be interesting to see how they market it this year with the rebuild going on and not looking towards the future.
It's funny that you mentioned how Hawks fans will come down in droves and Wings fans will do the same. And maybe I've just noticed this lately, but the Leafs seem to have a following just about everywhere out west, it seems like. I got to ask you this, because I know people are probably a little frustrated because we have just been going on a Central Division binge as of late, as I just whacked my microphone. I and it's funny, we're talking about the Chicago Blackhawks as we've gone from Minnesota, St. Louis, Dallas, and now we're Arizona and Chicago here. Do you think moving to the Central Division, as much of a pain for travel it is for the Coyotes, you're going to be in the market of Chicago, of St. Louis? Minnesota doesn't really have a big traveling fan base. They have obviously passionate fans. It's the state of hockey, but also then you have the Winnipeg Jets fan base, and if the border opens up at Freely later on during the season, that's going to be a big crowd coming down. If there's a year to change divisions, this would be the year, at least for ticket sales, right?
Absolutely. You get a couple of Chicago games, a couple every year. That should definitely help matters. It's definitely not like it used to be. Back when I first got into hockey, it was 2010, 2011. That was at the height of Blackhawks mania, so to speak. You couldn't get tickets to those games. I think I went to one game and paid like $80 for a nosebleed. That was the most I ever paid for a ticket, and I was like 20 years old. I was like, oh my god, $80, but it's Blackhawks. I got to go. And then of course you get there and you're outnumbered by the Chicago fans in your own rink, but. I think that could help. Like you said, there's a lot of fan bases here from the Midwest that have moved to Phoenix, and they still support their old teams. So definitely could be good for attendance to have more Central Division teams, especially from the Midwest, where those snowbirds come from.
Yeah, I know a lot of. It's weird because from people I talk to, it's the country of Canada in terms of people that like to go south for the winter. It's literally divided up into each region. Quebec, Maritimes, and Ontario, they like to go down to Florida, a few exceptions. But then the prairies, the Albertas, Manitobans, they like to go down to Texas. I don't hear a whole lot of people from Vancouver, though, going down to Arizona. I know there's a few just from talking to friends of mine, and they say, oh, yeah, I have my uncle that lives in Surrey, goes down there a couple times a year. It just doesn't seem like as many people travel in west, at least south in Western Canada. I don't know if you've noticed it or not, but it just seems like there's less of that out there.
There's definitely a lot of Winnipeg fans. They do the True North during the national anthem. You can hear them every time.
Well, I feel like that is straight salt from years ago. That is pent up aggression. I'm pretty sure, Lewis.
Absolutely, but you can definitely hear them every time they're here. There's a lot of them at those games, and then I think Vancouver usually brings a lot of fans down here. I think the Oliver Ekman-Larsson thing could actually help with that. A lot of people will still support him since now he's Vancouver. They might, be inclined to come to his first game back or stuff like that. Especially Connor Garland. Connor Garland's a fan favorite here, so that could be an impact in getting people to the rink. But there's a lot of Canadians, a lot of people from the Midwest out here during the winter, and in theory that should help with attendance. But those people aren't Coyotes fans, right? So they're only going to come to a handful of games. So that doesn't have the impact you think it would have.
I know so many people that were. This is obviously I'm tying it over to the east, Eastern bias, if you will. But there were a lot of people that lived in Nashville that were like Red Wings fans, and then the Preds came along and they were still Red Wings fans. But then after a few years, they're like, you know what? I'll cheer for Nashville. So all you got to do down there, Lewis, is you got to sell the people that travel down to Arizona and say, y'all should stay here because it's nice and whatnot. And then that's how you grow the fan base, right?
Absolutely. You gotta get some of these people to convert over to Coyotes fans and Suns fans and Cardinals fans and whatnot.
I just don't know how you're going to sell people on living in 125 degree temperatures, but that's neither here nor there. I'm not the marketing guy down there.
I think they said something like 100,000 people moved here in the last 2 or 3 years, so people aren't afraid of it. It's surprising.
I guess not. People tell me it's a dry heat, and I'm like, I was in Denver when it was 97 degrees. It doesn't matter.
It's still hot. Hot is hot, right?
It's still hot. Lewis, a couple more things, a couple questions here before I let you go. You mentioned OEL, and I remember I don't know what it is, but since he signed that big contract, whether it be the pressure, whether it be the status of being now the franchise, it just didn't seem like he was himself after signing that big contract. Did things turn sour at some point for you with Oliver Ekman-Larsson to lead him to being traded to Vancouver? Or do you just think that there was an array of events that caused his play to, in more ways than one, diminish?
I think there was a lot of things that went into that. Like you mentioned, the big contract. He got the contract, the captaincy, and Rick Tocchet became the coach all around the same time. So, I think there was some whispers about Rick Tocchet and OEL not really seeing eye to eye, which isn't always a great thing for your head coach and your captain to not see eye to eye. Then you have the pressure of making, $8.25 million a year. You got the captaincy. So that's a lot to kind of deal with all in a short period of time. And I think, he's 30 years old now. They say, your peak as a hockey player is, significantly less than 30, especially nowadays with all the young players that have come in and dominated. So, 30 years old isn't what it used to be in the NHL. So I think it's just a combination of those factors. You got the disagreement with the coaching staff, you had the contract captaincy, and he's not getting any younger. So I think it's a lot of those factors kind of came combined to have to make this move necessary. And I have no ill will towards OEL. I enjoyed his play here. It was fun to watch him on some of those bad teams, especially when they were trying to tank and get McDavid. I think OEL scored 23 goals that year, so that was a lot of fun to watch. But he was definitely the bright spot in a lot of those teams. But nothing lasts forever. That's why you see very few guys are retiring with the teams that draft them. It's just usually time for a fresh start eventually, no matter who it is.
And that, kids, is why you never buy a sweater with a current player's name on it, because eventually you'll get it and they will no longer be there.
I wanted to get one of those Connor Garland purple retro jerseys, and I was like, I'll just wait and see if they re-sign him. I kind of have a funny feeling, and then here, lo and behold, everyone's like, oh, he's their best player. They're not going to trade him. And I'm like, it's the Coyotes. I've been a fan for too long to kind of expect something to happen before it does. So.
My brother
jerseys here yet.
Oh yeah, my brother and I, we called it the year of Toronto, because we went to Toronto 5 times in 1 year, and we went to Blue Jays games, TFC games, all this cool stuff, because for some reason, even though we made no money, we were able to go to Canada a lot. It didn't make any sense financially, not at least. But we got I got myself a Brett Laurie Toronto Blue Jays shirt. My brother got a Rene Gilberto, and I got a Jermaine Defoe TFC shirts, because Jermaine Defoe was the big signing that year. All 3 of those guys were gone by the end of the season. Brett Laurie was traded for Josh Donaldson. DeVoe went back to, I think he went to Southampton, and Gilberto, I think, went to Brazil or something like that. And it was just the most bonkers thing. And I looked at my brother, I'm like, I am never getting another shirt or jersey with a current player's name on it. And I came this close to getting a Jose Bautista shirt once, and I'm like, maybe I should wait on this. And then lo and behold, the Jays didn't pick up his option. And I'm like, see, that, kids. I mean, I'm sure I'll never I think the last jersey I bought was a Mike Palmateer jersey for the Leafs, because I know that, hey, he can't come back. He hasn't played in 40 years. That's what I just laugh at that, because I see those pictures, especially around free agency, of people getting brand new jerseys. They just had bought them at the end of the season, thinking they're going to be there forever, or at least a few more years, and they're gone. It's lovely how that works, right?
Absolutely. I think I have a couple jerseys in my closet. I have an Oliver Ekman-Larsson jersey in my closet that, now it's out of dated. I had a Radim Rabada jersey that I had done after he led them in scoring. And they still didn't bring him back. It's like, well, so much for that. I figured that was a safe choice, but it wasn't. All I have left is the Shane Doan. That's, you can always break that out whenever you need to. But other than that, everything gets out of date pretty quick, unfortunately.
I think the 2 that were really fun. So I think the only ones I ever got that stuck were, I got Dominik Hasek in 2004. He went to Ottawa but then came back. Chris Osgood after the lockout, so that was fine. Both Red Wing sweaters. But then there was 1 year, because my dad had this deal, if I had 4 shutouts, I got a jersey. I don't know how he afforded all these, because I had a great year that year. I got a Mike Vernon Calgary jersey, but of course his career had been done, so it worked out. But I also got a Roberto Luongo jersey. I think it was the lockout year, 2004-05. And then a year and a half later, he's in Vancouver. Thankfully, though, Vancouver didn't want to pay that contract. They sent him back to Florida. So it works out in the end, I guess.
Yeah, it came back in style for you.
Exactly. It was the nice blue early 2000s one. It looks cool, and everyone thinks it's nice and retro. I still think they should go back to it entirely, but then again, that's just me being an old fart. Last thing here, speaking of retro players and old times, looking at your time following the Coyotes and being a fan of the Coyotes, as you mentioned, you really became a big fan during 2010, 2011 era when they were making the playoffs for, was that 3 years in a row or 4 years in a row?
I think it was 3 years in a row back then. They just had brought in Dave Tippett, and they went 3 years in a row, his first 3 years.
Yep, because it was 7 games against Detroit in 2010. Detroit got mad about that and beat them in 4 the next year, and then there was the run to the conference finals. Yeah, we're just going to say, for some reason, if the Coyotes don't figure it out and they have to move somewhere, just in case we, for some reason, forget to bring you on, even though I probably won't, what is your favorite moment with the Coyotes? Is there a moment that stands out? Was it the run to only 2 wins short? Was it 2 or 3 wins short of the Stanley Cup final? They lose in 5 or 6.
I think they lost in 5 that year. They lost on home ice, so it had to have been 5.
I remember because Mike Smith almost killed somebody. So they came a few wins short of the cup that year. Obviously, the bubble team was fun to watch. Kemper getting a career revitalization. What is your favorite moment with the Coyotes?
That's pretty easy. I'd have to say game 1 of that Nashville series in 2012. I had been to a handful of games before that. I was, kind of really getting into hockey, but I wasn't really a huge diehard yet. But then I went to game 1 of the Nashville series. I took my buddy to the game, and it was his first ever hockey game. So we're at the game. Don't really know what's happening. I had only been to a handful of games. It was just his first one, so we're just there taking it all in, and they won in overtime on a goal that came out of nowhere.
Ray Whitney.
Yeah, Ray Whitney.
The wizard himself.
In the third period, they got outshot throughout overtime, and then lo and behold, they win a face-off, and Ray Whitney scores, and it was just insane to be there. And I think it was just it was unbelievable. I was like maybe 21, 22 years old. We spent like $40-$50 on tickets, which was a lot for us back then.
$40-$50 for playoff tickets. That's Arizona kids. Holy moly!
Pretty much, yeah. That sums up the Coyotes' early 2010s. We're in the playoffs, but it's only $50.
Jeez,
come on.
It's $50 to park by the Scotiabank Arena during the playoffs for the Leafs. I tell you.
Absolutely. So yeah, it was that game 1 of the Nashville series is definitely number 1 on the list for me, but by a long shot. It was just a combination of everything. My buddy's first game, my one of my first handful games, and just the Coyotes being good for the first time in so long, and it was just one of the best sporting events I've been to.
It still kills me because you just had to go spoil. And Peyton Turnage, good buddy Peyton Turnage, is watching the show right now. He just texted me that Whitney goal because he's a big Hard Preds fan. And I just have to remind you that they decided to spoil the fun for us. We all wanted Pekka Rinne versus Jonathan Quick. That would have been the goaltending matchup. Instead, we get Psycho Mike Smith versus, well, eventually Psycho Jonathan Quick. He wasn't there yet, but it was still a fun playoff run to see that team, even though it was at the expense of all of us traditional hockey fans and all of us that wrote ACT articles and pieces to saying that this Coyotes team is a joke. And then they come within 3 wins of the Stanley Cup Finals. So I guess we're all wrong, right?
Absolutely. That's Psycho Mike Smith. That works for him. Whenever he gets mad, he plays better. So whatever works for him, right?
Well, yeah, he plays better because no one's going to stand in front of him. That's why he can see every shot.
They're not trying to score. They're trying to probably hit him in the face mask with the shot, right? So it's easy to make saves when they're trying to hit you with the puck.
That's why Mike Smith has become synonymous with this thing, the duck thing he does. It's as a goaltending coach and goaltending analyst, it's annoying to watch, but you can see why. Getting hit in the mask hurts, so I can see why. Just like a sitting duck, it's hilarious. But I guess self-preservation, I guess, is the way to describe it.
Absolutely, you got to make a business decision, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, shoot, he's getting a multi-year contract at his age. I guess that is a good business decision, except for I'm sure the entire Edmonton area is screaming at the top of their lungs right now, but I digress. That's why we're down here in Michigan. We have been chatting up here with Louis Pannone, Arizona Coyotes reporter, hopefully for longer than one more season. We'll just have to wait and see. Follow him, guys, on Twitter, Louis Pannone. Louis, thank you so much again for jumping on here. It's always fun talking about the Yotes, for better or worse. Let's hope that they stick around for another year or two, eh?
Absolutely. It'd be nice to keep on covering them and keep on watching some NHL hockey here in the Valley. It'd be nice.
You can cover the Quebec Nordique remotely, right?
We'll see. We'll think about it. My French isn't that good right now, so I'll have to work on it.
You'll be the English reporter. That's what it'll be.
Absolutely. There we go.
We're going to take a quick break, folks. When we come back, more of the Kuehl Show here on 12 Out Sports. And And welcome back to the Kuehl Show, everyone. Tyler Kuehl here, the Inside of the Insiders. If you're just joining us, you just missed a great interview there with Louis Pannone, Arizona Coyotes reporter. Always fun to talk with him. And we had a discussion, everything from ownership to Glendale to what it's like watching Ray Whitney score that goal. Yes, Peyton Turnage, that goal in the 2012 playoffs, second round against the Nashville Predators. So in about a little over 10 minutes time, we're going to have Zach Martin join us here from Belly Up Sports, Cannons, and Tomahawks podcast, talk about the Chicago Blackhawks. But before we get to that, let's get to some news here. News that we didn't mention off the top because we had Lewis queued up and wanted to get him in there as we deservedly should. But some news over the past 24 hours that have, 36 hours that have been just tough pills to swallow all around. First of all, yesterday, Rod Gilbert, Hockey Hall of Famer, Mr. Ranger, the first Ranger to ever have his sweater number retired by the franchise, passes away at the age of 80 years old. One of the most gifted players, probably one of the best, if not the best, player to never have won the Stanley Cup. Played on some really good teams in the late 60s and early 70s there in New York. Passes away at the age of 80. And then we learned this morning, Jimmy Hayes, 31 years old, retired, former Florida Panther, Boston Bruin, Chicago Blackhawk, New Jersey Devil player, passed away at the age of 31. That one hit because I remember Jimmy coming, because Jimmy was a Toronto Maple Leaf draft pick, and he'd won a national championship with Boston College, was a very talented hockey player, wasn't obviously a superstar when he came to the NHL, but was a guy that, loved playing in New England, Beantown guy. The Boston Bruins put out a great piece on him today as well. And, we'll probably ask Zach Martin about this as well when we have him on, given that he played for the Blackhawks, but certainly a huge loss to the hockey community. Our thoughts and prayers right now here from the Kuehl Show are both with the Gilbert family and the Hayes family during these very tough times. And going back to the Rangers, Henrik Lundqvist late last week announced his retirement after 15 seasons in the National Hockey League. This one was kind of back and forth, right? Like we weren't 100% sure if he was actually going to retire. Because remember how he had the heart problems, had to go back home, was supposed to play for the Washington Capitals, had some sweet looking gear. And, everything kind of just went a little sideways. And so tough to see him go. We'll probably talk a little bit more about him here, as you just saw. We're going to have Zach Martin come on here in just a second. We'll take another break, folks. When we come back, Zach Martin from the Cannons and Tomahawks podcast here on the Kuehl Show, here on 12 Ounce Sports. We'll be back right after this. And welcome back to the Kuehl Show, everyone, here on this Monday, August 23rd, a few weeks away from the regular season of the National Hockey League. Right now, we have the Women's World Championships going on right now. Czech Republic up on Japan 1-0 after one period of play. Second period from Calgary just about to get going here. Of course, like I said, mentioned earlier, we talked to Louis Pannone about the Arizona Coyotes. When we, of course, are sticking with the Central Division, it's an unintentional trend here on the Kuehl Show, but we're sticking with it, sticking to it. We're hitting the Hawks page now, and joining us is a guy that knows a thing or two about this team, a guy that's from Ohio, but is a Hawks fan, lives in South Carolina, all over the map. Then again, like I said, we've gone over this before. I'm from Grand Rapids, Michigan. I cheer for the University of Michigan Wolverines. I love Ferris State hockey. I'm a Leafs fan. It doesn't make any sense. But then again, we're here on the Kuehl Show, are not here to make dollars. We're here to make sense, and none of that indeed. With that, let's bring on our guest today. He is the co-host of the Cannons and Tomahawks podcast on Belly Up Sports. Ladies and gentlemen, Zach Martin. Zach, how are we doing today, sir?
Doing good, Tyler. Appreciate you with the invite, man. I'm really excited to talk about the Blackhawks. So, like I said, thank you so much for having me on tonight. Looking forward to it.
So, we were kind of talking off air during the last commercial break about how you were a Hawks fan in Ohio. Now, I know Big Ten land, we're talking about college football coming up here, Big Ten land, Ohio and Illinois and Michigan, like that, you don't cross borders in that certain area. But I guess if you're a hockey fan, growing up when you were in Ohio, you didn't really have much of a choice because, let's be honest, you don't want to cheer for the Cincinnati Cyclones.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting of how you're a hockey fan in Ohio, because for me, being born in 91, you didn't really have the Jacksons until 2000. So it's either you have Detroit, Pittsburgh, or Chicago. And I've always liked the logo, I always liked the jerseys. And, I'm a big Eddie Belfour fan. So it kind of just worked out like that, where I'm like, well, I'm just going to be a Blackhawks fan. And then, moved to North Carolina for a few years, got some season tickets through, me and my parents did. So kind of like also a Hurricanes fan at the same time too. But yeah, I can't cheer for a team from Pittsburgh. So, being from Northeast Ohio. So that kind of figured itself out for me.
Well, because you were born in 91, so you were technically alive for the series between the Penguins and the Blackhawks. If looking back on it, it really wasn't much. All it gave us was this kid named Dominic Hasek, but he wasn't in Chicago too much longer than that.
No, it's definitely a big what if the Blackhawks catch him. But of course, like I said, you had Eddie Belfour at the time and stuff like that. So you kind of had what can you really do? I mean, now if you had those two in this tandem era of hockey, the Blackhawks would have been an absolute wagon if you had both of those guys in net compared to it's this one guy for 90%, like 95% of the games, and then this other guy for like 3 games at a time. So
yeah,
I'm a lot different.
I remember we went on a dive one time on this program, and we were talking about like Cam Talbot in the year he was nominated for the Vezina in Edmonton. He had like 71 starts. And no one had started that many games since I think it was like the 2011 season. But back in the 90s, back when, like, if you knew your backup goaltender, that was strictly because you were a hardcore fan. Because even if you were a casual fan of your team, you knew one goaltender. I mean, back then it was Eddie Belfour and Band of Merry Men. I only know Craig Billington, that it was the backup for Patrick Waugh, because it's laughable that he was below 500 every single year in Colorado for the most part, but Patrick Waugh was the starter, so no one really cared.
Yeah.
And of course, the Chicago Blackhawks are very good friends with Patrick Waugh, I'm sure, because, I mean, then again, Zach, I'm sure you know as well as anyone, no matter what you say to Patrick, he can't hear you because he has his 2 Stanley Cup rings plugged in his ears.
Yeah, definitely I would say probably one of the best sound bites ever, for the fact that Jeremy Roenick thought he did something and then just, no, not so much. So, yeah.
Jeremy Roenick, probably one of the best talkers in the game. Hence why he had a job there for NBC Sports for a little bit. But Let's get to the current Hawks here, Zach. And, we mentioned it before, and we haven't really gotten heavily into it on this show just because there hasn't been a whole lot of detail. There's only been speculation and hearsay, she say. But now we kind of have a gist on the situation with former former conditioning coach Brad Aldrich. And, I've read a lot of Rick Westhead from TSN. He's done an amazing job covering this. Katie Strang as well has been involved in it. And of course, everyone remembers the State of the League address and then the grilling of questions from all the reporters before Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Finals to both Gary Bettman and Bill Daly. What is your take on this whole saga of the sexual abuse allegations that are surrounding the Chicago Blackhawks going back to the 2010 Stanley Cup playoffs?
Yeah, it's definitely, of course, read it at your own will if you want to, dive into the actual details and stuff like that, because it's pretty heavy stuff. So, I mean, it's definitely disturbing, and, unfortunately, it's another thing that's within hockey culture, that this isn't the first time that, these type of allegations have been thrown out, and unfortunately, it might not be the last, depending on when hockey ever decides to, crack down on this problem that they have. But in terms of the Blackhawks, I mean, it's a really tough situation, because you kind of heard rumblings about it, way back when, but it never really took off. And then, Rick Westhead just, in the last probably few months have really put out in the forefront. And it's probably, it's put the Blackhawks on they have to deal with this, because this isn't a story that's going to go away, especially with social media now. It's more rampant and it's everywhere, and, everyone's talking about it. So I think it's probably going to set a precedent to how things do get changed. And I think for me, it's like whoever was involved, and it could be whoever's in the front office now, for me, they have to be fired, like point blank. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's like if they knew about it and they didn't do anything about it. And if they come to the point where it's like it has to be done, I think for the Blackhawks, they have to do the right thing. And I mean, they have to make a precedent about changing the culture and fixing things, but they also do need to be like, well, if you knew and you let it go on and you give them a recommendation, I think you have to be fired point blank. And we might have to lose a GM and a president and a whole bunch of other stuff, but it has to be done. I mean, you've got to set a trend that's going in the right direction to help change the culture that's in hockey that unfortunately is still going around.
Yeah, because currently Brad Aldrich is being charged. I forget the exact charges. I didn't pull up the article at this right before the show, but he's being charged because he was working, and there was a high school athlete he was working with up in Houghton, Michigan, home of Michigan Tech, for those that don't know, and known as John Doe 2 in the case. Obviously, there's not going to be any names revealed, barring that. That's what the I'm going to say the prosecutor, the prosecuting case. They're not going to release names unless the party wants to. But it's this whole crazy saga with this whole thing, and the point that gets me every single time, because don't forget this, for those that don't know or have lived under a rock, or I guess are under the age of 10, that was the first Stanley Cup for the Chicago Blackhawks, first one in in a long time, 49 years. It had been since Bobby Hull and Stan Mikita and Glenn Hall were on the Hawks team. That's how long it was, and the stories came out, or the had been brought up what Brad was doing during the playoffs, and I believe it was the series they said against San Jose. Mm-hmm. And that right there, because you mentioned how hockey culture and the old school mentality, because you didn't want to ruffle any feathers during the playoffs, especially this could be the Hawks' year. We can't do anything, because had Stan Bowman and John McDonough, the president, had they actually done something then, would the Hawks have won? We don't know, obviously. But they didn't want it to affect the team. They didn't want anything to happen, even though there was, players talking, all, from what the people that are throwing out these allegations are saying, is that a lot of the players knew, which would include the upper regime, the Keiths, the Canes, and the Taves and whatnot. Obviously, none of that's been confirmed, but that's just with the way the John Doe 1 has described it, that's the story that it is. The recent piece, the real big piece, which, like I said, as Zach mentioned here, very graphic, very detailed from Rick Westhead, was the story from Paul Vincent. And he went public and he left his name out because he wanted people to know that he was part of the team. The former skills coach of the Hawks had brought it up to the upper echelon and had a meeting with John McDonough and Stan Bowman, the GM, sports psychologist James Gary. I had to listen from me just so I make sure I have the names right. He had mentioned it to them. Stan and them asked, how much do you know? And according to the article, according to Paul Vincent, he said that it was going to be taken care of. Obviously, as we've learned, the story is, however it was taken care of improperly. And it ties into this question here, Zach. Don't worry, folks. If you're watching right now, listening here on the podcast, we will get to the hockey side of the Hawks here in a minute. We'll actually get to the current team that's going to take place next season. But there is the Jerry Sandusky with Penn State. Recently, there has been the Bo Schembechler questioning with their former Michigan doctor, Robert Anderson, over the past few months as well. How do you think this story, whether or not anything is proven, whether there is any lawsuit that comes out of this, anyone's found guilty, does this affect Stan Bowman's tenure and his legacy as the general manager of the Chicago Blackhawks?
I honestly, it's an interesting question for the fact that, because with how Stan Bowman has, I guess, quote unquote, led the team, he's done a lot of weird trades and draft picks and a whole bunch of other stuff, and that's another story for another time. But in terms of this, I would say, yeah, it's going to change his legacy, because you're looking at, before it's like, oh, well, Stan Bowman was able to create a team that won 3 cups in 6 years and all this other stuff. You could have been more if some other bounces went the way for the Hawks in the playoffs. But I think this kind of will overtake that, because the fact this is a huge thing, because the fact that this happened in 2010, nothing got taken care of, and then you let the guy go, and then you give him a recommendation to work at a high school, which, if you knew
also Miami of Ohio as well. That was where I think the first one, but then the high school as well.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, Miami of Ohio too, which still blows my mind. Yeah, there's that other piece too that kind of gets lost, because it's like, okay, well, he went to 2 schools after this, and it's like the Hawks knew what happened, knew how far it went, probably had a conversation with him about this too. And I think it just keeps making it worse because of more that comes out about it. I think this does change the view of how people are going to look at Stan Bowman, because it's like, yeah, you won Stan, like you helped build the Blackhawks to win cups, but you let this guy go to a university and a high school without telling him, like, hey, this is what he did. We don't recommend him. It's a very bad look, and I think this will definitely tarnish and give a legacy to Stan Bowman that's going to be looked at more negatively than positive, of him building a team that actually did something for a decade. That's what everyone considers a dynasty, because they let this happen for so long instead of stopping it.
Because especially in the modern era, because that is the big thing, 3 cups in 6 years in the salary cap era, because the Hawks, especially those first 2 cups, just, and you and I both know, just unloaded. I mean, Chris, I can go the 2010 team, Dustin Byfuglien, Andrew Ladd, Antti Niemi, Chris Versteeg. Like, it's a laundry list of how, like, the talented players that had to get rid of that team because of salary cap. They turned it around. 2013 happened and had a little bit of a dump off there as well, but they quickly turned it back in 2015. Like, that's just how they were able to do it. And, you mentioned the front office, it should be cleaned house just because of what this could be. Do you think there is anyone else that was a part of that team? And I'm kind of pertaining to one guy here, and he is still a coach in the National Hockey League. Do you think there's anyone else that should be kind of looked upon in a lesser stature because of all this? And I guess you can probably guess it. I'm pertaining to Joel Quenneville. Or do you think if he knew any of it, or do you think he just was oblivious? Because Quenneville seems like the kind of guy that would just kind of just not pay attention to those sort of things, and honestly doing so.
I mean, you could speculate how much he did or did not know. I mean, Q was pretty much focused on the team and making sure, that he was running a tight ship in terms of making sure he wasn't really like a hands-on type of coach, I guess, as you look at how he is. It really depends on how much he knew. But in terms of, I mean, there's only so much a coach can do, because he's the head coach and stuff like that. So I mean, you can only take it to your boss, and then it's your boss and the boss's boss, and up the ladder, what they do with it. So would you look at him differently? That's tough to say, because I would say you can't look at him in the negative way, because the fact that, like, it is what it is, unfortunately, with the fact that it's the upper echelon that really should have done what was needed. You're a head coach. There's only so much you can do. I mean, you could say you wanted to fire this guy, but management has more of a say for the fact that, hey, we don't want to mess up what this run that we're on right now. And they probably we'll just let him go at the end of the season and be done with it. Well, unfortunately, we all know what happened. It wasn't really done with it. And now, 11 years later, now it's come back and it's catching up to the Blackhawks again. So I think it's for Quenneville, you can only speculate how much he knew, but at the same time, you really can't look at Q negatively as compared to the front office of the team, because, like I said, there's only so much a head coach could do in terms of getting rid of guys and how to fix the situation, if that makes sense.
That does, and that's why that's why this investigation is not going to end like tomorrow, kids. This is going to be a thing that's going to probably carry well into the season. And may not be so. I mean, lawsuits like this, they go on for years. There is still concussions and CTE cases that the National Hockey League has been figuring out for the last decade. So if anyone's ever curious on how long this will take, it could take years. There could be another presidential election here before we have an actual answer on this whole kit and ordeal. But with that, let's move on here. Let's get on to the hockey part. I had to get it at some point. I've only briefly mentioned it. I briefly mentioned when it was first reported and whatnot, because none of us had all the details. And Zach, I really appreciate you talking about this, because I know it's a very sensitive subject to a lot of people, and I really appreciate you helping me dive into it and getting your take on it as well. But let's get to the hockey part, the part where the guys on skates and they go around and shoot the puck. This year's Blackhawks team is just shaping up to be a very interesting team. I'm not going to go full scale and say this team is going to be a cup contender in the Western Conference. No, I'm not there yet. But I said they were going to make improvements a little bit last year. I didn't think they would be that good. I didn't think they were going to be hover around the playoff picture for as long as they did. But they showed signs of improvement. Obviously, Kevin Lankinen was such a great breath of fresh air in goal. Now they bring in Marc-Andre Fleury, who they were able to convince to play. They bring in Seth Jones, sign him to a big old contract. Captain Sirius Jonathan Taves is back on the ice, and we obviously found out what his problem was. Good to see him healthy. Patrick Kane will still be there. Alex DeBrincat will still be there. This team is shaping up to be a very competitive hockey club in what is looking to be a very interesting and tough Central Division.
Yeah, no, it's definitely interesting for sure, because even last year I predicted the Hawks to finish 6th. I didn't think they were going to do that good. And then we saw how it was for pretty much half the season. They were on fire. They were playing really well. At one point they got up to 2nd. I think they were 1st for a little bit and stuff like that. But then, of course, March happened and the team kind of took a nosedive because defense started getting a little bit sloppy and the goalies kept trying to do a lot more than they needed to. And it is what it is. But yeah, this offseason, I was really surprised. I thought, okay, we're going to probably run it back with the same guys, maybe get a few additions here and there and stuff like that, and keep work on this rebuild. Well, apparently the Blackhawks are like, no, not really. We're just gonna now become a playoff contender in one offseason, like you said, with Seth Jones, Marc-Andre Fleury. We also got Jake McCabe, Tyler Johnson from the Lightning, who just won back-to-back cups. So it's like they've kind of like, I guess would you say like hit the NOS or like cranked it to like 12 of like moving this rebuild a lot faster than everyone thought it was going to be. And it's definitely going to make it interesting because you look at Alex DeBrincat, like you said, he was on pace to score 50 goals last year if we had a normal 82-game season.
Right.
So there's talk that he might do it. He might get 50 this year, all depending on what line he's with and how it works out and stuff like that, which I could see it happening. Having the captain back, I mean, that's huge to have Taves back. I'm glad that he's healthy and see how he's going to be and stuff like that too. Plus, they re-signed Brandon Hagel, who did really well for the team last year too. Now see what this is going to happen with Kubalik. What are they going to do with Kirby Dach? Hopefully he gets a normal full season because he hasn't had a normal season yet.
Right.
Because we had a shortened 1920 season, and then we just had a half a season where he broke his wrist before World Juniors, and he missed like 3 months of the season. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see what the Hawks do this year. I'm not saying I'm like you. I'm not saying cup contenders, but I definitely think this is a team that could be making a push for a playoffs. Now, is it a wild card or an automatic bid in the Central? I can see that because the Central Division for me is a really stacked division in the Western Conference.
I'm saying 5 teams. 5 teams from the Central, 100%.
Yeah, same. Because let's be honest, the Pacific is not a tough division. If you look past Vegas and maybe a couple other teams in that division, California team,
Vancouver.
Yeah.
Vancouver may be the 3rd best team in that division. That's how bad it is.
Yeah, it's pretty bad because you look at the California teams. I think the Kings are probably the best out of California, and that's pretty much about it. And of course, you see with Seattle with the most anemic offseason in terms of a draft and a free agency and the expansion draft I've ever seen. So yeah, basically right now I think the Blackhawks have a good shot of making a wild card spot out of the Central, and I think 5 teams, like you said, are going to get in. It's just where are they going to finish in terms of that wild card, or are they going to get inside like that top 3? So it really depends, but I do think this Blackhawks team is definitely a lot better than they were last year with all the additions that they had. Like I said, with Seth Jones, Jake McCabe, and all these other guys. So I'm really excited to see what the Blackhawks do this year. It's definitely going to make this year an interesting year for them compared to what it could have been with running the same team back from last year.
Because it's so funny how I don't say they missed the playoffs last year after 2020 because they had to win a play-in round, but they beat the Oilers to go into the play-in round, and while they did get beat pretty handily by Vegas, it wasn't like it was an easy series for the Golden Knights in the bubble in 2020. But now you look at this team, you mentioned Dominic Kubalik, who was a Calder candidate. They bring in Tyler Johnson, who maybe it's just because they both played for Tampa and Chicago. I'm getting full Chris Kunitz vibes here. Maybe that's just me. But like I said, Kane and Taves are there because to bring Kane, he played a lot with Kane last year, right?
Yeah. He played a good majority with Kane, and then it was either they were centered by Dylan Strome or Kirby Dach at certain points of the season. But yeah, DeBrincat and Kane are basically like I would say probably a better man's version of what Panarin and Kane were, because Berrigan and Kane together, those two are lethal on the lines. I mean, Antonio Panarin's good. I think he's a really good player, but I think you see more of a good chemistry between DeBrincat and Kane in terms of scoring opportunities for both guys.
Yeah, and that's going to be DeBrincat has always been a excellent goal scorer. We saw that in junior hockey, and the only thing that he ever got knocked was, oh, he's too small to play in the NHL. Well, you know what? He's doing pretty good, I like to think. And of course, in the back end, Seth Jones gets to play with his brother Caleb. You have Connor Murphy and Calvin DeHaan, a good veteran presence there, and you have Jake McCabe. And Jake McCabe is coming from a Buffalo team that is just. I don't even know what to do with Buffalo. But I'm really interested to see McCabe, though, because McCabe has always shown signs of being a good defenseman. That's why I'm really excited to watch Philadelphia, because they have Rasmus Ristolainen. Seeing him play on a quality team. Jake McCabe's never had that in Buffalo. I think he's going to get some good time here. He'll definitely be a top four, unless, something were to happen. But I think this is a defense core in Chicago that's probably the best, dare I say it, since 15. Zach, you can probably correct me on that if you want.
Actually, honestly, that's probably the best I agree with you on that one, because outside of that, it's been Seabrook, who's kind of in the back end of his career. Now he's technically in Tampa now, because they traded his contract, but he's somewhat also retired. So it's a whole situation. But then they trade Duncan Keith, and he was basically like their best defenseman. I mean, we had Ole Amada at one point. That didn't really work out. Zadorov, I don't even want to. I want to forget that we had Nikita Zadorov for a season. I'm glad that kind of ended fast. But yeah, I think this is probably the best looking defense core that we've had in a long time. And the fact that, like you said, you have Jake McCabe, who could probably slot on the second pairing with Calvin DeHaan. You're gonna have a top line of Seth Jones and Connor Murphy. And the fact too, we also have Mike Hardman, Wyatt Kalynuk, Campbell, Ian Campbell. We also got a bunch of other guys too. It's like Nicholas Baudin. Like the defense is so deep, but the fact we have a bunch of young guys, and the fact that now they've kind of upgraded with veteran presence too, it's a good feeling knowing that this defensive core, it's gotten better compared to what it was kind of last year with a bunch of new guys and probably the years before that too, because the defense has been a massive issue for the Blackhawks. I think the last 2 years we've had the worst defense in terms of creating chances for the other team to have high danger chances to score goals, and our goalies have gotten lit up the last couple of years. So now a more structured defensive defense is going to be able to help the goalies out and help the offense out and becoming more lethal. I think we're in a good spot now with where this defense is at.
Yeah, because that's why we got to see so many Kevin Lankinen highlights last year. Not just because they were great saves, but because you had about 25 great saves a game, it seemed like.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
And I love Kevin Lankinen. I love the story, but Marc-Andre Fleury coming in, it's so funny because when the trade happened, I said to myself, this is clearly a cap dump by Vegas. And I understood. I understand the business side of things, even though literally it was just another sword in the back of Marc-Andre Fleury, part due. And then he said he wasn't going to play. And I'm like, okay. And that's why I thought Stan Bowman did the right move here. Didn't give up a whole lot. Didn't, give up draft picks to buy a goaltender. It was, all right, they want to get rid of contract space. We'll take them. You get nothing, though. Perfect. I mean, they obviously gave up a little bit, but wasn't a full-scale Shane Gostisbehere trade. But that's a story for another time. Yet here we are seeing Marc-Andre Fleury coming back and playing, and obviously he does give a rat's behind a little bit, kids, because we saw if anyone hasn't seen it yet, I know it's on Cannon and Tomahawks pod on Twitter. It's also circling around. Marc-Andre Fleury diving around in his net, looking like Marc-Andre Fleury. This guy wants to come back, and he's going to come back and play. That in itself is good to see if you're Chicago, because now you have an established number one goaltender, whether he is on the back nine of his career, even though he just won the Vezina Trophy. He can, be your number one guy, but also help prepare the younger goaltenders, Kevin Lankinen in particular, to breed them to becoming a number one guy, because since Marc-Andre Fleury is older, you can't expect him to start 65 games. You're going to see Lankinen quite a bit as well in Chicago, and that's why having Fleury in net with the Hawks could be beneficial for not just this year, but the future in net as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. Because I wrote about it probably about a couple weeks ago. Looking at the 5 takes for the Blackhawks this upcoming season, I even mentioned that too. That for the fact that having him in net is a huge deal because yeah, he's $7 million, but that's $7 million in a goalie who won his first Vesna, which is insane to think for the fact of how long he's played in the league. This will be his 18th season in the league. This is his first
Gosh.
Vesna. If that really tells you something, how long he's been here, how long it took him to win one, and for the fact that he's a 3-time Cup champion and a whole bunch of other stuff, and having him is huge. And I think it's definitely beneficial for Kevin Lankinen, Colin Delia, and a bunch of all these other guys that the Hawks have in their system. That you get to learn from a pro's pro and probably one of the nicest guys in the league. I mean,
Oh yeah.
Name one person that doesn't like Marc-Andre Fleury. I think the list is pretty much on one hand or just 2 fingers.
Nicholas Lidstrom.
Probably yes, but yeah, I mean, other than that, I mean, having Flower on this team is such a huge boost for the Blackhawks because outside of Corey Crawford, whenever he was hurt with the Blackhawks, there was really no solid goaltending. And they had Robin Leonard. Unfortunately, that only lasted for half a season, which kind of stunk because I really liked Robin Leonard. He's probably one of my favorite non-Blackhawks on any team. So losing him and then letting Crawford walk at the end of the season, it was kind of like, okay, now you have Malcolm Subban, Colin Delia, and an unknown Kevin Lankinen at the time, unless you're a fan of the Finnish national team and knew what Kevin Lankinen did at the World Championships.
Right.
You didn't know what we're going to be looking at, and then then Lankinen comes out of nowhere, blows the doors off the place, and at one point was a Calder, it can in talks with winning the Calder, but again, Marc-Andre Fleury. Now this is a huge step up for the Blackhawks. Is you taken probably a really solid option at goalie, and you made it to a great situation now with a guy who's been there and done that for multiple seasons in his career. So it's definitely a big boost for the Blackhawks to make them a legit playoff contender that could make a deep playoff run. How far we get, I guess it really depends on once we actually get there, but it's good to see that the Hawks did something to address something that's going to make them a better team now and for the future.
Yeah, because going into looking at this Central Division, and for those, like I said, who've been listening and watching the podcast here for the past few weeks, we have pretty much broken down the Central Division to a T. And last year, Chicago did not have to face Colorado. Because that's going to be it. I don't think anyone's doubting that Colorado is pretty much the favorite, at least at this point, even with Darcy Kemper taking over for Philip Grubauer, that's going to be the team to finish top of this Central Division. I don't think anyone's really questioning that. It's how it goes down the rest of the way. How would you say right now, if Chicago and Colorado are able to play today, even with Gabe Landeskog almost seemed like he was going to have a fallout with the franchise, how do you think those two match up at this moment? Because it seems like that's going to be the measuring stick for all these teams in this division.
I think Colorado is just top to bottom. I mean, do you take out their playoff woes of the second round? I mean, it is a pretty stacked team. Like I said, you have, Rantanen, McKinnon, Cal McCarr, all these other guys, Landeskog. It's definitely a team I think it's probably going to be it's a clear favorite to win the Central. I think the Blackhawks do have a chance to, give them a good fight, depending on how the season goes. I would say that it's probably going to be leaning more towards Colorado in terms of more wins between the two teams matching up. I think the Hawks could give Colorado a run for their money in terms of if you give the Blackhawks enough of a chance, they could do something about it. It's just they got to play pretty much not flawless, but close to it hockey to beat the Avalanche. But I do think the Blackhawks do have what it takes to make a case to giving them a hard time compared to, let's say, Minnesota and St. Louis and Winnipeg.
Right. And that's what makes last year such an anomaly because, oh yeah, totally, the Colorado Avalanche are going to beat up everybody, and Minnesota, I don't know how they played well against Colorado, but last year was so weird. You almost have to throw it out the door, also just because of all the movement going around. But hey, if Chicago gets outplayed by Colorado, they have Fleury back there who just thrives on that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But, looking at this division as a whole outside of Colorado, you have Dallas, who I think if Hudobin can stay healthy and fresh, and even if Jake Ottendrask in a few games, you have Braden Holtby there, who's a veteran goaltender. They still have Heiskanen. They still have all this good veteran talent mixed with young talent. And if they just don't have any COVID problems like they did last year, I think you can get some consistency in that team. That team actually really makes it run at the playoffs. There is Nashville, and if Peyton Turner, if you're still watching, I do apologize. We've gone over this. Nashville's probably taking a dip this year, but then there is St. Louis, who's going to probably take a dip as well. Minnesota, I think, is still going to be good, but now Winnipeg's back in the fray. Like I said, there's going to be 5 teams in the Central Division making the playoffs. But as we pertained to earlier, it just how the order's going to go 2 through 5 is just that's the big question in all this, and that's where we're gonna have to wait to see it play out.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely gonna be an interesting case how how the season goes on, because like you said, 2 through 5, you're gonna be looking at teams are gonna be different spots throughout the season, depending on how the matchups go against each other and the rest of the league. So you could definitely see a lot of shuffling as the season goes on. But yeah, the Central is just so deep that anyone can get hot. I mean, we saw Nashville last year; they were kind of dead in the water for most of the season. All of a sudden, like a month left in the year, they remember how to play hockey again and made the playoffs.
No, they didn't remember how to play hockey. UC Saros just became godly like goaltending. That's what happened.
Okay, Larry, that's fair. We'll just say that UC Saros decided just to become like Patrick Waugh on steroids and just wanted to stop everyone, and somehow that just worked down. It is what it is, but I just don't see Nashville as a powerhouse team because they still can't figure out the power play, and they still outside of Saros. They don't know really what's going on with that. St. Louis, I think they're going to take a dip. They're not as good as people think they are. I think they're just kind of they play a little bit out of their minds at some points, but Jordan Binnington has clearly shown that he was kind of like a half-season fluke wonder because he looked like a sieve through a lot of these games, and clearly his frustration got the best of him because he wants to fight backup goalies, which made absolute
I still think Dubé takes him. Dubnyk, 100%.
Yeah, if you give Dubnyk a chance, I think he'd probably drop him in about 5 seconds. But it's Jordan Binnington's clearly shown that if you get to him, he's just going to fall apart. So I guess he is pretty nervous. But Minnesota, it depends on what's going on with Kaprizov, because if he might be leaving for the KHL. If that's I don't know how the full details of that's still going on. But
everyone's still confident. They're like, it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. And I'm like, are you guys trying to talk it into existence, or are you is it blind optimism? I mean, I hope he signs because he's a great player. I love watching him play. But boy, if he doesn't, Minnesota may be in trouble.
Yeah, and like you said, if Dallas could do something if they stay healthy. That's only because if they get a lot of injuries, I think that's not really a deep team. That if you lose 2, 3, 4 guys, then you're probably looking at a 500 team compared to a team that could easily make the playoffs. So, like you said, with Winnipeg too, it all really depends. So I think the Blackhawks do make the playoffs. I see them maybe taking a 3 spot in the Central Division. It all just comes down to what's going to happen with Nashville, Winnipeg, St. Louis, and Dallas. For the other spots as well. Obviously, I think Colorado's going to win the division. It is what it is. But I think the Blackhawks do have a shot for at least 3rd in this division, in my opinion.
I would definitely say that's a good possibility this year. And then, hey, you never know, Zach. They may play Colorado, and then Patrick Kane can tell Nathan McKinnon or Darcy Kemper that it's their 3 Stanley Cup rings. They're plugging their ears, and I don't know what other body part they want to cover with those things. But that's how it'll all work for them with the Chicago Blackhawks.
For sure, yeah. Dangle they have some earrings or something, or have try to make it into a grill in his mouth or something. I don't know, but either way, it'll be nice for the Blackhawks to do something, because obviously they can show up when it kind of matters most, especially like you said with Edmonton a couple of years back. So all really depends. But honestly, I'm just really excited for this team. It's taken me. I've gone from we'll see how the season goes to all right. Well, this actually might be a fun season to watch this team. So it feels good knowing where the Blackhawks are at right now.
And I guess we'll end on this, and we won't go too far. We won't try to look too far ahead with the Blackhawks here, but just because of how, me being a Leafs fan, this team went from we're going to rebuild, first overall pick, Austin Matthews, Martin Nylander. They make the playoffs, and it's like, that's it. We're going for it, kids. But now here we are 4 years later, and Kyle Dubas is threatening to blow everything up. Do you think that that Stan Bowman, come trade deadline, the Hawks are 3rd or 2nd, is Stan Bowman going, all right, let's get some is he a buyer at the deadline, or is he going to play with house money, given that the fact that Marc-Andre Fleury's older, Calvin DeHaan's older, and the fact that you're going to have to pay Seth Jones for a few more years after this season?
If the Blackhawks are 2nd and 3rd and it look like a team that actually can do something, I do see Stan Bowman being like, all right, it's kind of time to go on, because we saw it back in 2015. They got Antoine Vermette. there's been years where they actually went and got guys like they got Brian Richards at one point for one of the other seasons too. So I mean,
Timo Timonen, that's another one.
Yeah, exactly. They've gone and gotten guys at the deadline if they knew they had a good shot at making the play. If they were going to make the playoffs and had probably a good chance for a run. If they're second or third and have shown signs that they've been a consistent team that's going to be winning game in and game out and not going like winning one, losing one, or winning two, losing two. If they actually do a lot more winning than they do losing, I can see Bowman maybe pulling a trigger on a move that's going to make this Hawks team go for it now. Marc-Andre Fleury's contract is at the end of the season, so I guess it really depends on how that goes. But in terms of the other guys like Seth Jones, if they find a way to make the cap work, I think Stan Bowman might make a push to go get guys and maybe do something. Like I said, it all depends on where they're at and how they've played throughout most of the season up to that point. So if they win more than they lose by a good margin, I could definitely see Bowman doing something at the trade deadline to maybe make that next push to be a cup contender rather than we're making a playoff and maybe doing a semi-decent run in the playoffs.
Well, I'm sure Stan Bowman, he is no stranger to just completely, disassembling a team after a Stanley Cup. So I guess if you win the big silver thing at the end of the year, who cares who's on the team next year?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it's there's some years where it's been interesting because we talked about 13 and 15. I mean, heck, the Hawks were one weird bounce off of Nick Leddy away from maybe doing a three-peat back in 14 when they lost to the Kings.
Justin Williams, Game 7.
Yep. Thank you, Alec Martinez, for that shot from the point. That's another thing I remember. And then, of course, look at 2011. Could have happened differently with the Canucks. So it is what it is. But, yeah, it's I guess all this is where we're going to be looking at the trade deadline this year. But, I mean, like I said, overall, I'm really excited to see what's next for the Hawks this year.
And I guarantee we just lost all of our Vancouver fans because all they're doing now is they're getting off this feed and they're going to go on YouTube and watch that goal by Burroughs and seeing Jim Houston go screaming. Because, of course, Jim Houston's such a biased broadcaster when he broadcasts for Vancouver.
Let's not talk about Boston and their homer announcers, but
I have had my way with Jack Edwards for the last 4 years. I'm a play-by-play guy myself, Zach, and I can tell you right now, he's not one that I try to emulate myself after.
Yeah, that's
SEC football there.
Yeah, if you're not a big Bruins fan, yeah, that's probably one guy you really don't want to hear calling games for forever, basically.
Oh man, I tell you. Well, hey, Chicago, you guys have a pretty good guy there, Mr. Pat Foley, former Grand Rapids Owls broadcaster from back in the late 70s. For those that don't know, a little hockey tidbit for you. Zach, of course, like we mentioned, we are here with Zach, co-host of the Cannon and Tomahawks podcast on Belly Up Sports Podcast Network. We see on the Twitter feed season 2 coming soon, Zach. When is season 2 coming soon?
Well, we are going to be, we're in the middle of kind of a rebrand right now. We are going to get a new name, new logo, because we're taking this to the next step. We're going more abroad around, not just.
Well, why do we even call it Kansas Top? It's show ABC is here on.
No, we are still Kansas Tomahawks right now. But yeah, so we're doing a name announcement probably September 1st, September 4th-ish. But then October 4th, we're going to the full name change. So we're really excited about that. So October 4th is officially going to be the start of season 2 for the podcast. So we're really excited for what's next. So we're doing NHL, AHL, all the way through the ECHL. We're even doing the Canadian Hockey League, and we're doing leagues in Europe too, just to, covering them as well. So we're going full hockey on our podcast, not just NHL, but pretty much everywhere.
That's going to be awesome because we try to do as much as we can here. Obviously, we like to talk about the women's worlds, but boy, going all out, going full international, that is going to be awesome. You can follow them for now on Twitter at Cannon Hawks Pod. That'll obviously change soon, but follow them now so that you don't have to worry about trying to follow them later on. But of course, then again, you will see their awesome name everywhere on the Belly Up Sports Network. We've been chatting here with Zach Martin. Zach, thanks again for coming on, talking about the Hawks, both the good and the bad, and we'll definitely talk to you guys soon, whatever show you guys are called, about the awesome stuff you guys talk about, and definitely talk Blackhawks later on. Thanks again, man.
Yeah, thank you, Tyler, so much, man. I appreciate the invite, and I've enjoyed being on your show, man. I'm really, like I said, just really appreciate it. And I hope you for the best too, because you guys do a really good job over what you do. So nothing but the best for you, man.
Thanks again, Zach, and we'll be back with more of the Kuehl Show right after this. And welcome back to the Kuehl Show, everyone. Wrapping up here this Monday night edition of the Kuehl Show. By the way, to all the folks out there that were in the YouTube chat, I do really apologize that I was not monitoring that well enough. Dad, of course, jumping in there as well. James Lill asking about point spread for college football. I can take a guess for you, but I'm not the best at that sort of thing. I know Nebraska's playing Illinois, so take the under if you really want to go into that. Shout out to Cooper Weinthaler for talking about that yesterday when he stopped by here. Also, like I said, Peyton Turner was on as well. Good old Preds fan who is scarred by the 2011 series. It's okay, Peyton. It's okay. Wrapping up here today's show, let's get into the Women's World Championship conversation. It started last Friday. Yeah, last Friday was the first set of games. Trust me, guys, when the way things have been, I know it's still technically the summer and technically the off season, but for some of us that cover other sports, it's been going on pretty hard for a while. I'm still covering the Little League World Series for MLive, and obviously we have NFL starting up here, and then college football starts next Saturday. Actually, is week 0, as James Lill, as you've seen in the YouTube chat section mentioning. Like I said, just for the first week of football, if it's 2 competitive games, pick the under, or pick the cover, not cover the spread. But if it's like Bama versus Alabama A&M, 100% go the over, whatever that may be. So with that, let's get into the Women's Worlds page here. A lot of great action already. Now, yes, the favorites are very apparent: United States and Canada. That game coming up the 26th, in just a few days, is going to be, it's shaping up to be the matchup, the game of preliminary action right now. There have been a couple good games, though. Let's kind of run through here the highlights, if you will. Like I said, right now the Czechs are up on Japan 3-0 at the end of 2 periods. And they've been playing really well, have the Czechs. Czechs, of course, like when we talked with Dan Rice last week, they were our picks to finish atop of this group, right behind Germany. Czechs right now are going to be 3-0 if they can hold on to this lead. They beat Denmark 6-1. Denmark's had a real rough go of it, guys, as this tournament's gotten on. But Czech Republic started off strong. Alina Mills gets a hat trick, 4 points in the 6-1 win. That was the very first game of the tournament. Pavlina Horolikova also had 4 assists. Vidula Pribilova with a goal and an assist as well. A little bit of an interesting game in that second game against Hungary. By the way, shots on goal right now between Japan and Czech Republic. Japan actually outshot the Czechs. Despite falling behind 1-0, outshot them 12-4 in the first period. The Czechs now are starting to take over, and shots were 9-2 in period 2 as we get ready for this second period. By the way, TSN is doing an amazing job here. They are getting a lot of younger talent for this event. They have Kenzie Lalonde calling the game right now for TSN. I've obviously not listening to her right now, but she's done a couple of really good games. A good job calling games for TSN for the Women's Worlds. And I've said this before. We'll get back to the Czech Republic here in a minute. This is going to sound very bad, and I've said it to a lot of people before, and my wife actually agrees with me when I say this. I don't want to call women's hockey. And I think I've said this on the show before, but I'm going to say it again for those that are just tuning in. I don't want to call women's hockey because there are so many other women out there that deserve that chance to call hockey. Now, that's not saying that women should only call women's hockey, men should call men. Trust me, like I said, Leah Hextall is going to be working for ESPN next year as a full-time play-by-play gal. Totally deserves it. But what I'm saying is, I feel like I'd be taking an opportunity away from someone else. That's my take on it. If that sounds bad, I'm sorry, but that's how I feel about it. I feel like someone should be allowed to call these games because they are outstanding. There's so many outstanding female talents that don't get the shot because as we mentioned with talking about Brad Aldrich there with Zach Martin just before the break, that there is that old school hockey mentality. So if I give up an opportunity to give someone else an opportunity that typically wouldn't, I'm totally okay with that. That said, back to hockey here, back to the action. They beat Hungary 4-2. And the game itself was really weird. Czechs brutally outshoot the Hungarians. I forgot the exact number. Let me look it up quickly here for you, kids. The IHF website, as very bland as it is, actually is very good. in terms of getting good content. TSN.ca is also really good because obviously they cover the event, they broadcast the event, they have good stuff. And I'm pretty sure I hear my dog chasing a ball around because I hear her pounding her feet outside the door. Hungary was outshot by the Czechs 36-13. However, shots in the third period were much closer. They were only 13-7. Hungary actually, I believe it as well, actually outplayed the Czechs in the second period. It was a little bit closer in the third period. But Czechs go up 4-0 and seem like it's all but over. Hungary, once again, getting shut out. Rough go for Hungary. Like I said, this is their first ever tournament in the top tier, in the top division of the World Championships. But then they do this weird thing where they start to come back around and they start playing well. And next thing you know, bang, they get a goal. NWHL draftees, by the way, Czechs just scored again. We'll get to their scores here in just a minute. NWHL draftees that we talked with Dan Rice, Fanis Gasparic and Rika Dabasi, both scoring the goals. Dabasi getting the first goal for Hungary ever in the top tier of the World Championships. Make it 4-2. And here's the thing, too. It was a very penalty-filled third period. Hungary had a lot of chances there towards the end to find a way to tie the game. The Czechs caught themselves into trouble. And that's why I think you see them here playing a lot better after that slow first period, because they realize if they want to be a contender, get into the elimination, the knockout rounds, they have to play better. Now, granted, they're going to have to face someone from this Group A that's looking really tough. But I think they got a little bit of a shot in the arm after dominating that first game. 6-1, easy win for the Danish team. It was not that hard for them. They got it done. But then Hungary started to play tough and give themselves a shot. And I think that kind of caught the Czechs by surprise. And you see that now in this game, they're playing a lot stronger after getting, like I said, outplayed in this first period against Japan. Japan, we'll get to their game, they do have a win to their record. I think they're a pretty good team as well, despite what their record might show. They are probably the team that's going to probably finish fourth out of Group B here. By the way, the goal scorers for the Czechs in this one, up 4-0, like I said. Dominika Leskova scored in the first period. Naomi Nubauerova scored in the second period. Elena Mills, her fourth of the tournament, later on, just past the halfway mark of the hockey game, and just scoring there, Katerina Mezrova, who I believe that is her second as well, if I am not mistaken. I can't click her name. Where's my numbers on here? I think so. Should have been. No, maybe not. No, yeah, Chris. No, it was not. Pribilova scored her second in the game against Hungary. It was a pretty looking goal too. Nice little move. Looked like the Jaromir Jagr goal he scored against Mike Richter a few years back. Man, I'm getting a lot of notifications here during the show. Good Lord, I feel my phone vibrate during the interviews. I'm like, I'm not gonna let myself be distracted here. So yeah, Czechs are right now looking to be going 3-0. Germany 2-0 after winning today. They beat Hungary in game one, only 3-0, but it was very lopsided. The shots were actually, no, they were not. They were lopsided one period, but Hungary actually played a very tight game against them. Nina Kristoff, first ever game in the top tier for the German national team for the Women's World Championships. Nina Kristoff, 2 goals in the first period. Julia Zorn sealing it in the third. 19 save shutout for Jennifer Hars. Hars plays well in game 2 earlier today against Denmark. 3-1 win, 21 saves for Hars. 23 saves for Cassandra Repstock-Rome, who played pretty well for Denmark. And Denmark has, maybe it's just because I see Fredrik Andersen, they find a way to produce interesting talent, like just talented players that you wouldn't expect, because Denmark is, typically known as a football nation, a soccer nation. But they always seem to be competitive at some points during world tournaments, and I love to see them every chance we get. Josephine Jacobson scoring the goal for Denmark today. Julia Zorn scoring her second. Julie Schaefer and Teresa Wagner, the other goal scorers for Germany in their 3-1 win. Moving over, I guess the surprise, if you will, here in Group B, or Group A. Japan, by the way, beat Denmark 1-0. 26 save shutout for Nana Fujimoto. And Hiraku Yamashita got the lone goal in that game. Right now, Japan's still getting shut out. Actually, let's stick on Group B for a second. They were showing Fujimoto during the game. This is when we were talking with Zach Martin. They were showing her how she gets ready and how she was actually training during the pandemic. She attached the VR toggles or the controllers to her blocker and glove, and she had vision. And she would track. That's how she would, like, during the pandemic, she would practice. She'd be in her room and, she'd be set, goal, blocker and glove, watching the shot come in with a stick too. Watch shot, glove side, blocker side. And I'm like, that right there, like, you talk about evolution in training, off ice training. And there is the Hockey Minds software that I've seen that came out that was very brand new, very beta when I was playing. And now seeing this with virtual reality and showing folks that video games do actually help you get better. Now, granted, that's nowadays, not, when I was playing. I can't say my NHL 2004 Dynasty mode was getting me any better for, being a goaltender, but that's neither here nor there. The past is in the past. I'm not pointing fingers at anybody except for me. But it was really interesting to see that. So Japan looking to fall to 1-1 here if they are not able to pull something crazy out of it here. They play tomorrow as well. They'll be taking on Hungary, a chance for Japan to get a win, or chance for Hungary to get a win. Wouldn't that be interesting? And that's what makes the Hungary-Denmark game coming up here on Wednesday very intriguing, because say Hungary loses tomorrow to Japan, all of a sudden that game, whoever wins that game, moves on to the knockout stage. So that can be a really interesting one on Wednesday. Germany's next game, they play on Wednesday as well. They'll be taking on the Czech Republic, looking to improve to 3-0. They play the Czechs, and then they play Wednesday, Thursday. They have Japan on Thursday to wrap up their pool play. Denmark, after falling today, they are back at it on Wednesday as well against Hungary, looking for at least one win after losing to Germany and the Czechs and Japan. Going over to Group A now. Yes, it has the two powerhouses in it. Both 2-0 are Canada and the United States. Canada had a very funny game against the Finns. They fall behind 2-0, by the way, to the Finns in the first period. Storm back with 3 unanswered. Finland ties it up shortly after Canada took the lead early in the third period. Finland scores to tie it up 3-3. And then all of a sudden, before anyone blinks an eye, 25 seconds later, Sarah Fillier scores, and it's 4-3. Brianne Jenner ices the game there at the end. Canada wins 5-3 despite outshooting the Finns by a 44-11 margin. Go to game 2 for Canada, taking on Russia. Russia and Canada, long-time historic rivalry in hockey. Well, it's obviously a little bit less in the women's game because Canada's dominance. Cooper was here last night watching the game with us, Cooper Weidenthaler. And he was trying to figure out what the heck was going on because, oh my goodness, guys, Morozova, Nadezhda Morozova. I'm pretty sure I said her first name wrong again. I apologize. I practiced it earlier, but I think I just messed it up. But Morozova was just superstar. It looked like Vladislav Tretiak was in net for the Russians, the Russian Olympic Committee, excuse me. I don't know exactly how many saves she has because the Double IHF doesn't have it on here, her exact stats, but she was really good. She made so many big saves. The first half of the game, 0-0 through 25 minutes, and it seemed like that's how it was going to be for a long time. But then Canada finally broke through, Fillier scoring her second of the tournament, and Canada was off and running. They ended up out shooting, I believe, 62-7 were the shots in favor of Canada. Let me make sure I got that right. Yep, 62-7. Russia did get a goal in the dying seconds. I think it was like the 20 or 1959 mark. Olga Sasina scoring the lone goal there for Russia. But boy, Canada, I was nervous going to that Finland game for Canada, just because I didn't know how Canada was going to come out. Because don't forget, Finland had been playing; their women's league had been playing. Russia had been playing quite a few games as well. Canada, they had the one Dream Gap Tour weekend, and that was it. That they really hadn't, because of all the restrictions and problems in Canada during this pandemic, they'd hardly been able to touch the ice. So you thought, all right, how are they going to be able to come out? Are they going to come out flat? They have come out guns a-blazing. They have been hammering. And whether you want to say it's home ice advantage in favor or not, they have been playing dominant hockey over the first two games. So kind of curious to see how it goes against them when they play the Swiss tomorrow. The Swiss, surprisingly enough, 0-2. They fall, and they're going to be in some deep doo-doo because as far as we know, we don't know the status on Alina Mueller. They lose in the first game to the United States, despite a heroic effort by goaltender Andrea Brandley, 55 saves. Brianna Decker and Kendall Coyne-Schofield each scoring in the game for the United States. Grace Zemwinki as well. Or Zemwinki. Then they beat, U.S. then beat Finland 3-0. Hillary Knight scoring her 44th goal, which ties her with Cami Granado, by the way, for the most in Women's World Championship history. So one more for her. She'll be standing alone with Hillary Knight. Zemwinki and Kelly Panik scoring. Zemwinki scoring her second. That's why the Americans are 2-0. But the Swiss are 0-2. And they lost to the U.S. and they lose 3-1 to Russia. Lena Mueller scores first in the first period. Swiss are off and running. You think, all right, perfect. This is their game to win. Give them a shoe into the knockout stages. And then disaster early on in the second period. Lena Mueller goes off with an ankle injury. It does not look good, kids. And if she doesn't come back, we talked with Dan Rice last week about her. Really good player, probably the best player on this Swiss roster. If she doesn't come back, there could be problems. Because I don't know if Switzerland's good enough to beat the Finns. I don't know if Switzerland's good enough to make it. I don't think it's going to be really tough. I don't think it's so hard to look at them because I don't know if they can beat the Finns, and they play Canada tomorrow. That is not going to be an easy time. And that, at this point, that Finland game is the must win because the way Canada's playing, it's not going to be easy for the Swiss. So as a quick jump on over here to the standings, can I do that quickly enough? Yes, I can. Oh, dang it. Didn't click it right. I clicked the stats instead. Let's go to standings. Here we go. As of right now, Canada, 6 points with 2 wins. Same for the Americans, both 2-0. Russia is 1-1 with a loss, so they have 3 points. Because remember, international hockey, they got it right, 3-point system. Finland and the Swiss both 0-2. Now, granted, Finland played Canada and the United States. They got their 2 tough opponents right out of the way. They will be playing, so I jump back over to the schedule here. Tomorrow is U.S. and Russia. Not going to be an easy game for the Russians. Swiss and Canada. And then the Group B matchup, as mentioned before, Japan and Hungary. Then on Wednesday, Russia gets Finland, which, I mean, you're almost praying that if you're Finland, you get that win because then you don't have to have pressure going into that last game against Switzerland, which will be on Thursday. And then the other game on Wednesday, Denmark-Hungary, both those Group B matches. The big one, of course, is U.S. and Canada on Thursday. It is the most prime time possible game. It's a 4 o'clock local time start in Calgary, 6 o'clock here, because they don't want the 9:30 start time because everyone knows Eastern Seaboard's where it's at, kids. That will be the big game. And that, I'm not saying my mind has completely changed on Canada because I'm still nervous of will fatigue get to them as you go into the later rounds because they do have to play a quarterfinal game, have to play a semifinal game, have to play a gold medal game if they want to win the whole kit and caboodle. You're probably going to have to meet the Czechs. Oh, Japan almost just scored as the goaltender gave the puck up. I had a Ty Conklin flashback there for you. But it's not going to be easy for them to get through this if they want to win. Anyone who's not picking the Americans still are loonies. And that's not a knock on Canadian currency. It's hard to not pick the Americans right now. That's why I think that game is going to be a real talking point of who is the favorite to win this whole thing. Now, I'm not saying Germany's has no chance. I'm not saying the Czechs have no chance. But right now, Canada and U.S. are the front runners, I would say, to be playing in the final game. Because I'm not sure how the bracket would work. If both teams went 4-0, I'm not sure how the bracket would, one team would go 4-0, the other would go 3-1 or 3-0-1, whatever it may be. I don't know exactly how the bracket would work if they'd ever play each other before the gold medal game. So there is a lot to be excited about, a lot to be intrigued about. I don't know who's going to win this thing on Thursday. I would still have faith in the Americans winning, but I would still also pick Americans to win this whole thing. Now, granted, hockey is a very weird and dumb sport, so anything is possible. The Czechs may be in the gold medal game against whomever may be the other team from Group A. So then again, we could have a weird set of circumstances. It could be the Czechs and Germans in the final. Who knows? Welcome to hockey, kids, where the stupid happens and we all have to accept and nod our heads and keep going. Except if, you know, if you're Brad Aldrich and the Chicago Blackhawks, in that case, you should be saying something. But that's neither here nor there. We already went over that. We talked about that with Zach Martin, which, by the way, if you missed that interview with Zach Martin, or if you missed that interview with Louis Pannone at the top of the show, it's okay. Don't panic. Watch the replay tomorrow on the Kuehl Show YouTube channel and or you can listen to it as well on your favorite podcatcher. Listen to me and Zach and Louis talk about hockey, and listen to me blabber on about other things. They had some good stuff to talk about. They always do. Me, I'm just happy to be here on the Kuehl Show here on 12 Ounce Sports. But that is it for this one, because kind of ran out of stuff to talk about today. And next week we'll come back. I don't know with who or with what, but we will be back next week as we get closer to the preseason. September 25th is the first slate of games for the preseason. I'm excited. Of course, excited to get with the World Championships here. Who takes home the gold medal? We will actually, let me just look ahead here, because next show will be the 30th. We'll be talking, semifinals. Ooh, that's going to be fun. Semifinals will be on the 30th. One game will be at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock Eastern time. The other will be played at 7 o'clock Eastern time. So we'll be right in the middle of our show when the second semifinal happens. After that, the gold medal game, I believe, is to be played on, it's going to be on the 31st on that Tuesday at 7:30 puck drop. I had to make sure I looked at that right. I'm like, 7:30? Yep, 7:30 puck drop Eastern time, 5:30 local time next Tuesday. And, of course, there is I believe, because there's also another game that day, the winner of 25 and 26, I believe. Is it? I don't know. There is the placement games, for the bottom two teams in each, the qualification games to stay alive, the relegation games, yes, which I'll be honest, can be just as fun to watch. Obviously a lot less at stake, but those two teams are playing for their tournament bids for next year. It's a lot more fun to watch in the World Championship or the World Juniors because they're actually televised in some form. I don't know if these are going to be televised for the Women's World. I'll have to keep my eyes on that, because right now I had to get a Fubo TV subscription for this because I had used up all my free 7-day trials for all my emails, and I guess they caught on because my credit card was getting voided. I couldn't submit my credit card for my free trial, so they caught up to me because I was watching. That's what I did for the World Championships, because half of them are on ESPN Plus, the other half and the finals will probably be on NHL Network on Fubo TV. By that I mean TSN broadcasts it and ESPN Plus and NHL Network takes it, because God forbid NHL Network did their own thing. But that's neither here nor there. But with that is it for this week's episode of The Kuehl Show here on 12 Ounce Sports. Always thank you once again to Louis Pannone and Zach Martin for stopping by and talking some puck. And, of course, for all of you for listening to me yammer on about women's hockey, which should always be talked about because I enjoy it. I enjoy it because you all will as well. You just got to watch it. It's fun to watch. It's good hockey, guys. And it's also fun to watch hockey in August. Then we have hockey in September, and then October, and then the season officially gets underway in the National Hockey League. It's a good time to be alive, kids. Make sure you follow us at The Kuehl Show on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. #TKS. We will see you all next time, ladies and gentlemen, on The Kuehl Show. Goodbye.